Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 84 of At the Coffee Table Podcast. I'm Jason Klink, your host. I'm going live today, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and even Instagram. And I wanted to make this podcast episode today as I fly solo to talk about, and out of my lenses, how the world sees office access. And I'd appreciate it if you drop any comments or share this with anybody you might get some kind of value out of it. But you get to hear me rant for the next, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes about uh, how I think the world is kind of off kilter. So much going on, and so many distractions, yet there's so much greatness that's still available in the world. And, this podcast was created based on, all the years, and I've talked about this before, all the years of sitting in the firehouse and we'd sit around the coffee table, and over a couple of cups of coffee, we'd solve all the world's problems. And not that I intend to solve all the world's problems here today, but I wanted to have a conversation virtually about how difficult, the world can seem, how our own little worlds can seem, and how distractions are abundant. The last few years haven't been all that easy, but there's still a ton of opportunity out there to grow and expand who we are. You know, One of the things that I have learned over reading and discussing and following history is that, history and things that occur in the world are very cyclical. The good times go with the bad times and the difficult times and the times that we struggle, and it's the balance that you have to find between. And with this podcast on At the Coffee Table, I have created this without any specific niche, easy for me to say. And if I've been asked that before, what's the niche of the podcast? Well, there is no niche. The niche is, sitting down and having a conversation. And, we have gone through a lot in the last few years, and, quite a bit, honestly, quite a bit of it's politically driven. Quite a bit of what's even going on today is politically driven. You have, struggling economy, out of control inflation, gas prices through the roof, interest rates through the roof, and because of decisions made by politicians that should have very little impact on our own personal lives, have created an impact on our own personal lives. And with that, now they create distractions. Politicians that are out there, 1% elite, and you can agree or disagree with me. That's entirely up to you. But this is my view through my lenses of how slowly there's different distractions. And if you look over the course of time, in the course of history, there's always a distraction from difficult times that may be happening. But when there's good times, the distractions are less frequent because everybody's in line, everybody's happy, and people are succeeding. When that doesn't happen, we have to create distractions. Just recently, the Supreme Court has created its own distraction. Now, I'm a constitutionalist by heart. That's where my political alignment begins and ends, realistically, is being a constitutionalist. To me, the Supreme Court, their job is to weigh and measure certain laws and judgments that are made if they're constitutional. And that's what they were tasked to do here, or they had on their dockets to do here recently. But it's created distractions because of the decisions they were made and the judges that are on that court. And, if it doesn't play into the current political agenda, it gets torn apart and politicized and sensationalized in the media, and it creates that distraction, and it knocks the earth off kilter a little bit more. Everything that's occurred in the last couple of months not only has been shocking and sensationalized, but shocking and realistically awful, has further divided our already divided country. And I think that's the goal. They divide people and put them in certain squares, we'll say, and if you don't, if you don't belong in a certain square, or you don't completely comply with a certain square, you're outcast, or you're, a disruptor, or you could be whatever other label you want to call it. And again, knocks the earth a little bit farther off the center. Realistically, a lot of what goes on in our own personal lives are how we design our own personal lives. Are we creating our own difficulties? Are we not solving our own problems? Are we not identifying our own hurdles? Are we failing to grow? Are we failing to be self-aware? When we shine in these areas, it's very easy to move past a lot of the distractions that are going on. But keep in mind that the people that are in power, and power has made people very dangerous. People that are in power need complete compliance, or somewhat complete compliance, in order to keep their power. The Constitution was created in this country to allow or not allow that to happen. And over the course of the last, 70 or 80 years, it's been allowed to happen. And make no doubt about it, a lot of what's going on today, these seeds were planted 80 years ago. If you really take a look at history, and when information wasn't as abundant as it is today, the narrative was created by what was going on with politicians and the news media, and they control the narrative. Now that we have information that's at our fingertips, it's very difficult for them to control the narrative, but they're finding ways to do it because now they're controlling the other outlets that control the narrative. We should always be in charge and empowered by our own narrative. How do we want our lives to look? How do we want our life path to play out? Now more than ever, it's so very, very important to be hyper-focused on our goals and our successes and where our struggles are, where our failures could be. I truly believe that we're in position now as, just in the United States, we are in position right now as American people to make some serious change that benefit everyone in the country, but we got to stop the division. We got to stop falling into our squares. We have to, take control of our country in objective and productive manners, and exercise the rights that we've been given in order to not implode from within. Because there's certain entities out there that are, they are hoping for, I guess, for lack of better terms, that implosion. I don't know if this rant makes a whole lot of sense, and some things that I talk about, I'm trying to keep it from making it politically one way or the other, because that political divide's wide and deep, and I don't need to foster that any. But there's more to our country than Democrat or Republican. There's more to our country than one side or the other. There's more to our country than just one race or another. The whole gender thing, I don't even know where to begin with that. That just, the science is the science, and that's where I'll leave that. You are, as a human being, even as an adult human being, have the ability to choose how you live your life, whatever way you live your life. But at no time should we be influencing children that are still growing mentally, physically, and beyond to make decisions they are not prepared for, given their specific age. And there's topics going around that our children should not have to enter into conversations about. And that's where I think a lot of Earth being off kilter is lying right now. We are, as adults, are not doing by our children like we should be in this country. We're way better than that. We're way more advanced than that. And it's just become very, very difficult to see this unravel and unfold. I hear stories from my wife being a school teacher on conversations at schools and what's being allowed and not allowed, and what agenda is being pushed and not pushed. And coming from a kid that, I grew up in a whole different type of era, and what's going on now just wouldn't happen, I don't think, then. Because we're all so connected and all that information is there, a lot of these agendas can get pushed and pushed and pushed to where they become social norms. When they become social norms, they're so much harder to get rid of. So, I wanted to jump on and make this quick podcast today. A, because it's been way too long since I've done a podcast episode, and I've gotten away from getting these scheduled. And B, because I was kind of moved by the different thoughts in my head and things I've absorbed here recently to share my opinions and share my thoughts and my visions through my lenses. And I'd be very interested to hear what all of you think of your vision through your lens. Because you know what? We have that ability to have our own lenses, have our own opinions, and have conversations with them. Productive conversations without turning it into division. And you have to jump into one box or another. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I've had podcast episodes about this before. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And we should be treating each other as human beings. Because you know what? Our time is not infinite. Our time is finite. And, we have to do the best by ourselves and the best by our family in order to have a very enjoyable and satisfying life on this planet while we still have it. Not to go too deep, but that's kind of where I'm at with this podcast. So again, I'd appreciate it if you'd drop a comment, like the show, share the show. You'll be able to hear the audio version on Spotify. And again, I went live today, as I typically do with Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, but I decided to do a live on Instagram today. Because it's not very often I drop in and do the podcast live on IG. So I'm hoping to set up some new guests on the podcast here in the near future, and be a little bit more regular with the podcast, because I still love doing this and having these conversations, especially when I get to talk to some amazing people out there when we sit down here at the coffee table. So with that, I will end for today, and I hope you all take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have a great day.